UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
The paranormal,
ghosts,
spirits,
demons,
reincarnation,
past lives,
the afterlife,
divination,
exorcisms,
witchcraft,
the unseen.
He's psychic medium Chris George.
And he's Victor the Voice Furman.
We are Second Sight Radio. Join us live
every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time
on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Tune in to the Mind Cemetery with your hosts Chip and Nicole every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. We delve into UFOs, abductions, ghosts, aliens, conspiracies, and cryptozoology.
And how could you ever forget about those creepy topics you won't hear on your local news?
This is where I would insert my obligatory skeptical statement. The Mind Cemetery, where the paranoia about the paranormal comes to rest.
Follow us on Twitter and subscribe to us on Facebook. Also, check us out on our website, mindcemetery.com, for show updates and the critically acclaimed Mind Cemetery blog.
It's not critically acclaimed, but you should check it out anyway, mindcemetery.com.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we host News on the Flip Side. Come join us every Saturday night at 7 p.m. Central for our 3-hour program. We have opinions on everything, and we're not afraid to share them. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can find it here with News on the Flip Side. Remember, don't be politically correct. Just be correct. Join us.
Welcome, everyone, to this evening's broadcast of Global Newsmaker Focus. The program is broadcast live on United Public Radio and UPRN 107.7 FM, New Orleans, Louisiana, and 107.9 FM and 105.3 FM, Henderson, Pass Christian. Our guest is author, retired Colonel Richard Hobbs. Vernell and I are honored that Colonel Hobbs is the featured guest on this evening's program with, as the major topic, the radical nature and goals of Islam. This is Patrice Sheridan speaking. I wish to note a brief bio description of today's guest for our listeners. Author, retired Colonel Richard Hobbs, is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Selected as an original Olmsted Scholar, Hobbs received the degree of Doctor de l'Université in International Law and International Relations from the University of Lyon in France. He spent 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. Again, he spent 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, advising Vietnamese paratroopers and serving as executive to the deputy commander in Vietnam, managing a large fire base, commanding the 2nd Battalion, 28th Infantry, and advising a Vietnamese regiment. Hobbs was an Army Research Associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. He has served in the Pentagon and with the Department of State as politico-military advisor in the Bureau of Near Eastern and South Asian Affairs.
After retiring from the Army as a colonel of 27 years, he joined Teledyne, where his positions included Vice President International. He established his own consultant firm, Service International Limited for international business development. Colonel Hobbs has taught courses in international politics and international conflict at the University of Nevada at Reno. Colonel Hobbs has also served as the Assistant Professor of International Relationships and on the faculty of the Department of Social Sciences at West Point.
Some of Colonel Hobbs' books include Radical Islam at War with the World, Do We Want Dimitude, Third-Class Citizens, Slaves Under Islam, or Do We Want to Be Free? It is Our Choice, Death by 1,000 Cuts, Islam, Fiscal Responsibility and Other Threats to Destroy America, World War IV and Beyond, Islamofascism, The Third Jihad and Other Threats to the USA, You and the New World Order, and The Myth of Victory. What is victory in war? And, sir, before we begin, Colonel Hobbs, I just wanted to mention, when I was noticing the 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, we had several Vietnam War veterans listening to the program tonight. They're so proud of your accomplishments, sir. We all are. Now, let's turn to a very important topic, the radical or real nature of Islam, the goals of Islam. Thank you so much, sir, for joining the program this evening.
Thank you. My pleasure to be with you.
Now, sir, you've mentioned both in your work and your articles and your books the very complicated nature of Islam. First of all, sir, you mentioned that Islam is really a facade of a religious system. You believe, and many researchers do as well, that Islam is actually a totalitarian ideology and political and indoctrination system utilizing brainwashing, subterfuge, you referenced the term stealth jihad, and deceit. They call it taqiyya, also aggression and, when expedient, violence. That Islam is a supremacist religion. Sir, I know that you could really explain this to the audience far better than I could.
Well, you hit it very easily. The beginning is that Islam is not a religion as we in the West envision it. It is a totalitarian ideology, as you already mentioned, with a facade of religion, which gives it great power. And one of the important things about all of this is that Islam, like most other things, it's a doctrine of ideas. And interesting, it's probably the greatest brainwashing in history. And I'd like to quote just a couple things that come from a gentleman who wrote a very outstanding piece about the brainwashing. It's Nikolai Sennels, who is a Dane. He's in Denmark. And he said the 4 mental factors are anger, self-confidence, responsibility for oneself, and tolerance, intolerance. When it comes to anger, there's a big difference between Western societies where we see anger as a sign of weakness, whereas in the Muslim culture, anger is much more accepted, and we've seen that quite often. In Western societies, we have the ability to handle criticism, and no matter how true it is, it's an attack on one's honor for a Muslim. Muslims never attempt to counter criticism with logical arguments. They turn to name-calling and being offended, as you might remember from the cartoons from the Denmark newspaper and so on. They just went out of their minds over that one. And responsibility, loss of control, everything is controlled by Allah. And that's that term, inshallah. Inshallah, which means everything is up to Allah. If the world falls apart, He did it. If the world's good, He did it. If the world isn't, He did it. I have no responsibility, and this removes the requirement for individual responsibility and gives that world-famous Muslim victim mentality. And so this whole business of tolerance, Muslims consider and have constantly been told since childhood that they are superior to non-Muslims and they are destined to dominate non-Muslims. So killing another person is a lot easier if you hate him and do not perceive him as a human being. So that gives you a beginning of it. Let's go from there.
Well, sir, as well, your writings very carefully analyze and document the fact that right now that Islam is engaged in an insidious and relentless attempt to subvert and conquer all global governments and systems to promote a global Islamic caliphate. Well, Colonel Hobbs, they've been mentioning this. For example, even some of the Christian networks and their fine broadcasts have been mentioning the danger of a global Islamic caliphate. And here, reading your works, you very eloquently pose an argument that that's just what they're doing.
Well, it is, and it's their objective. And this is where you get into the whole question of jihad and what the goal of Islam is. We can come back to the Quran later. But first of all, there are two types of jihad. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
There are two types of jihad. First is the greater jihad, which is the struggle within oneself. That is interesting. The lesser jihad is the violent struggle. Now, apologists like to say, jihad is only the greater struggle. Well, that happens to be nonsense. Al-Salik, which is the Reliance of the Traveler, which is the Shafi School of Jurisprudence law book, originally written in 1368, but updated in 1991 and approved by Al-Azhar University in Cairo, which is one of the outstanding and most authentic places for Sunni Islam. And they have a whole list of information on jihad. This book is 1,150 pages. They use one sentence on the greater jihad, and then they go 11 pages on the violent jihad. I think that puts it in perspective. And to put it exactly,
احسب ساعاته تسهر الليل ونحسب ساعاته بحر الحب مصعب موجاته عندي معك عادة من وقت تجيني
Wonderful.
Yes.
So I heard some background noise. It sounded like Arabic. Someone might have been, you might have been on a news site or something, and that was someone had a news site open perhaps, and we were beginning to hear that. Well,
somebody's trying to catch up with me.
Yeah, that's possible too. Well, I'll tell you, quite frankly, many people on the network were very upset when the Muslim Brotherhood was invited to the White House. Now, this event did occur, correct, Joe? I don't know if Joe can intervene here, but there was a great deal of media publicity on this, and you believe that the International Muslim Brotherhood, that being the same as the Muslim Brotherhood, created Hamas. The Muslim Brotherhood's goal is to replace world institutions with an Islamic order, and I'm just going to very quickly see if they did show up at the White House. I think that they very strongly that they did, and I'll give the date.
Well, yes, and you have to understand that the Muslim Brotherhood is active in 70 countries around the world, and it's very active in the United States. People don't want to face that, but it started in the 1960s when a group of various people came out of the Middle East, a lot of them out of Egypt with the problems with Nasser and so on. But three Iraqis set up the first Muslim Students Association, University of Illinois at Urbana in the early 1960s. Almost every Muslim organization in the United States has come out of that Muslim Students Association. The most famous and current one is CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations, and the leader of that is Nihad Awad, who is normally recognized at the White House and other places. So what you're saying is quite accurate. Go ahead.
Well, sir, I found this particular let me see here. Muslim Brotherhood influence reaches White House, U.S. CBN. Now, it's just, I myself here, I'm just suggesting that perhaps this fellow was not a good guest. Let me see, the article is dated August 28th, 2013. Now, I should have researched this. I really very much apologize that I didn't. But here, let me see. Oh, here it is. It's CBN News, U.S., entitled Muslim Brotherhood Influence Reaches White House, posted again Wednesday, August 28th, 2013, so it's last year. Let me see. I'm just quoting directly. Before President Barack Obama departed for Israel earlier this year, he took time to consult with Mohammed Majid. Majid has reportedly become a trusted administration advisor on issues ranging from immigration to counterterrorism policy. Let me see. And then... oh, heavens. Let me see. Further quoting from the article, according to analyst Ryan Morrow of the Clarion Project, an organization dedicated to exposing radical Islam, ISNA's agenda is anything but mainstream. We know from the Muslim Brotherhood's own documents that ISNA is a Muslim Brotherhood front, end quote. Well, you know, I think that there might be a further event where another party visited the White House, but I don't have actual reference to that there. So I apologize for that because I would like to have that link as well. But, sir, my comment here is we have to just be careful in America. Now, of course, our President Obama has the best wishes of America foremost in mind. We know that. But we just as Americans have to be careful whom we're seeking advice from on any level. For example, even with our colleges and universities, you mentioned that the Wahhabis, I hope I'm correctly pronouncing it, Wahhabis, thank you, have been seen to it that many, many mosques are being constructed in the United States. I know at one of my alma maters, there was a mosque being constructed about 2002 or 2003, just before I finished my schooling there. And I found it a little bit jarring, quite frankly, to have it on campus. It was so closely after 2001. And you were mentioning, too, an interesting quote, and to me it is appropriate, by a scholar, an author by the name, like yourself, by the name of Dr. Lori Roth, who considered it was a great insult, that idea of constructing a mosque at ground zero, in the ground zero vicinity in New York City. Exactly. You have to understand, and it's even happening in Turkey right now, where we have a former Christian church, the Sophia, is being reestablished as the Sophia Mosque. Throughout history, when the Muslims took over a country in the first jihad and then even in the second jihad, first jihad goes from the death of Muhammad in 632 to the sacking and burning of Baghdad in 1258. And whenever they went into a city, they took over the church and turned it into a mosque. So that was a symbol of domination. And the mosque at ground zero would be a symbol of domination. And that's where Dr. Lori Roth is very, very right. So I remember at the time there was an argument, a counter-argument that, no, they were trying to show that really Islam was a religion of peace, but no, it might have had another motivation, another motive, an insidious one, to show that in a sense that they were... That's the insidious part. And Islam is not a religion of peace. That's the biggest piece of propaganda in the world. And that's what we've got to stop, and we've got to grow up and pay attention to what's going on. During the expansion of the first and second jihad, the second jihad is the Ottoman Empire, which goes up to the end of World War II, and Kemal Mustafa Ataturk dissolved the caliphate in 1924. In that period, 270 million people, the best that we can judge, were killed. That's 120 million Africans, because the slave trade was run by Muslims. You have to remember this now. The slave trade almost exclusively was run by Muslims, and so your blacks out of Africa. The fact the word in Arabic, abd, is both black and slave, same word. 120 million Africans, because about 8 to 1 died before they could get them any place.
60 million Christians, 80 million Hindus, and 10 million Buddhists. The Hindus and Buddhists were brutally attacked in South Asia and massacred. So the religion of peace business is a very interesting thing. You have to go back to George Orwell, 1984. The words mean exactly what I want them to mean. Their definition of peace is there will be peace in the world when all peoples submit to Islam and follow Sharia. Well, now we will have peace. Well, I don't think so. They'll still be fighting among themselves as they are today, and it's a bad joke on the world. Go ahead.
Well, something, too, that I found very interesting, and that was there is a further motivation for the jihadists to or for them. I certainly would consider it horrific, but it's not just even the promise of those 72 virgins when they visit, when they go to paradise, when they translate into paradise. I had no idea of this. Per Muslim beliefs, a jihadist is assured of paradise, but not necessarily the average Islamic man, the average Muslim, following the tenets of Islam and the Quran. That person isn't guaranteed paradise, but the jihadist is.
No, the jihadist is not. That's not quite complete. It's the martyr. It's the martyr. If you die in the path of Islam, you are guaranteed entrance into paradise. That is a wonderful, brilliant way to motivate fighters. If they die, they're going to paradise. Otherwise, they're not sure they're going to paradise. They have to be sure they've led a good life, and that's not sure until the end.
Well, thank you so much for that clarification for me, and I'm sorry that I had a little misconstrued a bit. Now, the second point is regarding women. Per Muslim beliefs, the Muslim women are assured of reaching paradise only if they please their husband at the time of the woman's death. Other Muslim women are not guaranteed paradise. True.
Isn't that a nice way to control women?
Absolutely. It's horrific.
It's disgusting. Women are totally subordinate. They're chattel. Absolutely chattel. And there's a very interesting thing. A guy wrote a very fine article on the Stockholm Syndrome, which is how a woman is beaten down to embrace Islam. And she ends up finally with only three options. She has to embrace the Stockholm Syndrome, wait to be honor killed, or flee Islam. And then suicide is one way of fleeing Islam. But that is the thing, and this person said this was Muhammad's greatest discovery, that they had come up with that. Honor killings are, we don't see anything or accept anything like that, but to kill your own children is not a crime in Islam. And that means your wife, your daughter, cousins, and so on, and we see these women killed regularly. And it's all for the male honor. Honor being a big, big thing in Islam. And there are two other things that are very interesting. Well, there are a lot of things that are interesting about women. The way they're treated is just terribly. The half the value of the word is of nothing. They can't marry who them they wish. They can't travel without escort. They can't leave the house, so on. Plus the honor killing. Female genital mutilation is another one. It's disgusting, that sort of thing. And it's so easy to divorce. A woman can't divorce the man very easily, but all the man has to do is say talaq 3 times and he's divorced. Bam, gone. And he can beat the woman, which is also in the Quran.
That is horrific. Now, I have had students just through ESL. I've also taught ESL, and some of them were from Saudi Arabia, very brilliant individuals, and from other countries there in the Arab world. They were very bright individuals. They had other degrees. They seemed to really love to apply themselves to their studies, very intelligent women. I'm worried about their future because they're so bright. I would like them to have careers that their intellects merit. Also, even a couple of months ago, we were discussing on News on the Flip Side, great show, just on Saturday evenings. It's the flagship show of the United Public Radio Network. Well, we were discussing this lovely couple. I forget their names. They were a Saudi husband and wife. I believe the husband is an attorney. The wife might be as well. And the Saudi government was giving them such a tough time. They strongly believe in equality of rights. And then you have Saudi women really protesting not being able to drive. Do you think that the Saudi women can overcome this, or is there just so much horror?
It's very interesting. Golly, let's see, 1973. That's how long? That's 40 years ago. I was in Saudi Arabia, and I had met with Prince Abdullah, who is now King Abdullah, who was at that time the head of the Saudi Arabia National Guard, and we were out in the desert observing some operations of the Saudi Guard, and I saw this dust off in the distance, and I asked one of my escort people, I said, well, what's that dust? He says, oh, that's the princesses they're driving. So in 1973, I thought, oh, man, it's only going to be a very short time before they're going to be driving in Saudi Arabia. It hasn't happened yet, and that is it's very interesting. You've got these women who have doctorates, they're brilliant women. Some of them, a lot of them do work, but they aren't allowed to drive. So it hasn't come yet. It's a very sad situation where a whole culture really gives up half of its brain power, and that's sad because they're wasting half of their brain power.
So well said, Colonel Hobbs. I know these students were very, very bright. Now, right now, fighting ISIS, there is a world coalition. Some of those are Arab nations. Do you think viewing the atrocities of ISIS, it may wake them up as to the really horrific some of the Islamic concepts that just are horrific, or not really?
You don't see much movement in the coalition. We got a few airplanes flying. The only ones that are really doing anything are the British and the French, and the Australians are coming in. The Australians actually sent some troops in. The Air Force from Qatar included a woman pilot in that first airstrike. Right afterwards, her family was they disowned her. So here's a woman who is a pilot, and her own family is already giving her trouble. So, I don't see a lot of movement among the Arab countries, and I don't see why we need to spend so much time over there. This is a fight. It's a civil war within Islam, and we're going to be on the wrong side whichever way we go. There's no win in this one for us, and it's a bad, bad situation. It's a terrible long fight. This is a fight that goes all the way back to the death of Muhammad. It's nothing new, 1,400 years of hatred. And just to make something clear for you, the order that was given and what they're doing with ISIS, the Islamic State, execute all Shiites immediately. I saw a video that they put out. It was a 34-minute video, excellent propaganda. They have terrific media development, probably a bunch of Europeans and Americans that are doing it. It's very, very professional. The first parts of it showed everybody moving equipment. They captured tanks and armored personnel carriers and artillery. Then they had truckloads of prisoners. They took them off into a field and shot them all. Another group was moved over to a dock where a man put a pistol to their head and pushed them into the water. Very strong propaganda, just like the beheadings that you've seen in recent weeks. This is powerful, but it is accepted in Islam, and the recruiting has gone up and skyrocketed, so that we now have something over 15,000 foreigners operating in the Islamic State.
Thank you for that very much for that clarification. Those comments also recall to me your discussion, and it was a very important one, of the Islamic concept of the inferiority of the outsider. Am I correctly pronouncing this? The kafir, Kaffir, the outsider. And also that these outsiders include not only the non-Muslims, but Muslims deemed not properly following Islam, for example, moderate Muslims, and also the Shiites that you mentioned being killed by ISIS because they are Shiites.
Yes, and in today's news, we had the Islamic State just executed 4 women up in northern Iraq, 2 doctors and a politician. 4 other women were executed in recent weeks, including a former candidate for the local council and an academic. What you're seeing now, in the first couple, 2 months after the capture of Mosul, they were concentrating on the Shiites and the Christians. Now they're after the Sunni members of the civil society groups and anyone who's remotely connected with the government. So now you're after what you're talking about, which is the moderate Muslims. And a moderate Muslim is a very difficult position to be in because of the policy of apostasy. If you are not supporting Islam, you're an apostate. And the penalty for apostasy is death. So it's a very dangerous thing to speak out and say, oh, I don't like the way things are going. I think we ought to shape up Islam and make it into the 21st century. You will immediately be called an apostate, and somebody may put a fatwa, a religious order out to have you killed. And this does happen rather often.
Well, the extreme brutality and violence as shown by ISIS has been so extreme, so horrific, extreme violation of human rights. They reported, and there have been documentations of the crucifixions, the beheadings, the rapes of captives.
Okay, but one thing, don't forget, this is true Islam. This is not an aberration of Islam. This is the Islam of Muhammad. They are following the true Islam of Muhammad and the Quran. People don't like to accept that, and we've got all these leaders, including our own, saying the Islamic State is not Islamic, and we got the foreign minister in England saying, oh, that has nothing to do with the Quran. Unfortunately, it does have everything to do with the Quran. That's the way it is, and that's the way it was 1,400 years ago.
Wow, that is something I definitely had not known, and also is going to reference that concept of human trafficking, ISIS being involved in this, the auctioning off of women, also reports of assaults on orphans, and many of these, perhaps all of them, I think, have been documented in a UN report, at least several very strong accounts of that UN report that we discussed last week on News on the Flip Side. Again, a great program. Also,
but that is true. I mean, the women, the Yazidi women were taken. Many of them were sent out to be wives, in quotation marks. Some of them were sold. The going rate in the market, last I heard, was $25 a head. Some of them were returned battered, beaten up, and badly bruised and bad shape, sent back. And then there's a very interesting thing, which was the sex jihad. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
I've read about that. I think, is it the country of Pakistan? I'm not sure.
No, the jihad, I'm talking about Syria still, and the war that's been going on for 3 years now in Syria. They called for women to come to Syria to support the troops. And one of the terrible examples was a bunch of young girls around 18 years old from Tunisia had gone to Syria. And this one girl came back, I think she was 19 years old. She was pregnant. She'd been beaten up. She'd been with 100 soldiers, and she had AIDS. So,
That's horrific. Mm. Well, there's as well.
Called for, this is an official request for the women to do this. And this has come out a couple times of calling for women to do this. Very sad.
It is very, very sad, and including, of course, the burying alive of Yazidi men, women, and children. And also there have been accounts, and several strong ones, regarding the beheading of Christian children. Now, with ISIS committing these tremendous human violation of human rights, the UN report now cataloging some of these horrific violations. Can you see the UN actually taking action against ISIS?
Oh, I don't see how they're going to have any role. I don't know what they can do. The Islamic State doesn't have any intent to recognize the United Nations, and the United Nations is not going to be able to do very much to the Islamic State. As far as they're concerned, they are doing everything right in their perspective. I mean, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who is the head of IS, has a doctorate in theology. Actually, it's a doctorate in Muslim studies from Saddam Hussein University in Baghdad. So, I think he knows his Islam. He knows it quite well, and he's following it. This is Islam, and I think it's time for us to wake up and realize this is Islam. And we've got people all over the world, in Europe, right here in the United States, saying we want to impose Sharia. Democracy is no good. Let me give you a quotation from a man you all know. That's Ayman al-Zawahiri. Remember him? He took over from Osama bin Laden. He is now the head of Al-Qaeda. In his book, Knights Under the Prophet's Banner, he said, human beings cannot be sovereign. Sovereignty is Allah's alone. Therefore, democracy must be destroyed. Democracy is nothing more than a pagan religion, is a form of jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah means everything before Islam is useless and of no value. It's called ignorance. And that's why you destroy it. That's like, you remember the Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan where they blew them up? They're doing the same thing. And right when they go into Mosul, the first thing they do is blow up all the churches. And they'll blow up a Shiite mosque even. But they'll blow up all the churches. So anything that relates to anything that is not pure Islam, it has no value. They have no sense of history. We like to look back to history and look at the pyramids. When they went into Egypt originally, they wanted to blow up the pyramids. Well, they didn't have anything to blow them up with, so they couldn't figure out how to destroy them. It even came up in the recent days under Morsi when somebody wanted to say to destroy the pyramids. So this is a mentality, and they are superior in their view, and your view is irrelevant.
Those are very powerful comments. I remember, too, with ISIS, those reports of archaeological sites being destroyed as well. Here I'd like to turn to the concept of dhimis. Am I correctly pronouncing it? Spelled Dhimmis. The inferior kafir status is a second-class status. It could be someone who is a slave or not a slave. Am I correct there? But they aren't Muslim.
What, dhimmis?
Yes, sir.
No, dhimmis are non-Muslims. Dhimmitude is a status of how you deal with non-Muslims. Basically, when you approach a non-Muslim in the jihad, when you invade one of these countries, you really only give them two choices. You convert to Islam or we kill you. Convert or die. That's it. That was with the Hindus and the Buddhists. Hindus, bam. All the Buddhists almost pushed out of India, and that's when most of them went up into Nepal and so on. There is one exception. That is for Christians, Jews, and some Zoroastrians. They are given the second option, third option if you would, and that is to have dhimmi status, which means it's a subordinate status, and they have to pay a poll tax, which is called the jizya. Usually runs around 25%, and that was how they financed the great part of the first jihad. So this is a very, very humiliating system. It would remind you of the Jews under the Nazis in the sense that they wore, them wearing a yellow star on their thing, but it's very similar. The Pact of Umar dictated what clothes they could wear. They couldn't carry a sword. They couldn't ride on a horse. If they had a church, they couldn't ring the bells. You couldn't speak anything about your religion where another Muslim could hear it. You couldn't repair your church, which meant it would eventually deteriorate and be gone. All of this long, long list of items put them in a very subordinate position, which made it first easy to convert so that you would now become a Muslim, or if you didn't, you were in a very bad situation. That is dimitude, and that is what we have in this country to an extent, in that we give in to them on so many things, and it's very, very sad.
You know, I want to go into this point, Colonel Hobbs, and I just want to note as well that from the writings, I found this very intriguing, that the Dhimmis actually provided the economic support for classical Islamic expansion with the major jihads. They were providing the treasure for that, for Islam to so expand.
Tell people, don't worry about the Dhimmis. They're financing your progress. That's right. That's where they were getting a lot of their money. The Arabs that came out of what's now Saudi Arabia, came out of Arabia, were not farmers. They didn't work. They got all their income, as it was, usually from stealing. And Muhammad was a master of that, because when he left Mecca, before he was tried as a traitor, he ran up to Medina, became a dictator, and the way he made his money was by raiding the caravans from the old Quraysh tribe out of Mecca in their caravans into Damascus, and that's where he got money. Interesting, in the law books, highway robbery has the penalty of death, but I guess it didn't apply in the early years.
You know, I hope I can remember correctly that from the writings as well, that Muhammad really butchered or really undertook a tremendous, assault against the Quraysh tribe.
Yes. The Jewish tribe?
Yes.
Yes. That is one of the black marks on Muslim that they try to ignore, but after he got really strong in Medina, he turned against the Jewish tribes, and he wiped out the first one. He let them leave if they left everything behind. The second one, they could stay, but he took half their crop every year. The third group, after the Battle of the Trench, he thought they had crossed him, so he ordered that the women and children all be made slaves, and all of the men were stood up, and they either converted or had their heads cut off. The number is not sure because of history, but it appears to be 600, and it goes as high as 900 men that were taken out one at a time and beheaded. And his little young wife, we married when she was 6 years old and consummated at 9, she was with him, and it continued under torchlight into the nighttime, according to the myth.
Wow. Well, when we mention attempts or examples of attempted subversion by Islam of other governments, would that entail such actions as attempts to modify legal rights of Muslims in a favorable fashion in America for their benefit, the seeking of preferential treatment, the changing of certain expressions regarding Islam?
Oh, you're talking about here in the States?
Yes.
Yeah. That's
to not use a certain term.
What we call the stealth jihad.
Could you explain that, please? Mm-hmm.
Well, this again is their superiority attitude. We tolerate this intolerable attitude. They demand everything. So they come over here, and first thing they say, we want you to give us everything in Arabic. All right, wonderful. Secondly, we want halal food. We want the food done in the Islamic fashion. We want separate housing. We want the gyms to be separated. We want the swimming pool. We don't want women allowed in the swimming pool with men. We want men and women separated. We don't want any books that are any way saying anything against Islam. Constantly demanding preferential treatment. If we go into another country, we don't do that sort of thing, and we wouldn't get away with it. But they demand it all the time, and this just goes on regularly. And this is also in the legal side. They don't recognize American law. They want Sharia. Well, Sharia has no place in America, and this is what we would call creeping Sharia. They're trying to get things into it, initially through domestic things involving marriage, divorce, inheritance, settlements, and things like that. And we've tolerated that. We've permitted it. Down in Florida, there was a case where a judge threw it out and said, no, let them settle it under their rules. Well, you can't have two legal systems. You just can't have that. So we have a problem going on with that. And then they sought to change American expressions regarding Islam, and the government gave in to them. That's CARE again. They purged the training manuals of the Army, of the military, of the FBI. They can't use the word jihad. You can't use Islamists. You can't use this. And so now we have some of these crazy expressions. That guy in Oklahoma cuts a woman's head off. Oh, this is not Islam. This is workplace violence. Oh, cutting heads off is what we do every day in the United States. Yes. And we don't have any jihad problems overseas. We're now called overseas contingency operations. Well, we need to wake up because you can't use certain terminology. We need to go back to Sun Tzu, our Chinese historian, who said, first thing to do is know your enemy. We have to realize we are in a war with Islam. We've been at war for 35 years. That's 1979 with the fall of Iran and the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini, and also the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, which ended up by creating the Mujahideen there. So we have a real problem. And the mosque, that was the other thing that you had mentioned earlier. Right. We permit the mosque. How many churches are there in Saudi Arabia? Zero. How many mosques in the United States? We've lost count. 1, 2, 3,000. Most of them Saudi financed. And the other part that's really bad, and it's discouraging, 81% of them, by several different, very prominent and authentic studies, they're preaching violent jihad. That would be called treason or sedition under the law, but we are too scared to even touch it. And they have jihadi literature in there from everybody from Hassan al-Banna, who is the man who created the Muslim Brotherhood, to Sayyid Qutb, who is one of the spiritual leaders of jihad, a long time in Cairo, before Nasser finally got tired and finally got him hanged.
Well, that's very, very thought-provoking. Very, and you're mentioning the importance of the Sharia law there. Indeed, from your work, I've read. I think this is a very upsetting concept that the Muslim religious duty is to actually have their government an effective foundation and exponent of Sharia law.
Absolutely.
Really a framework for Sharia law. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Absolutely. Yusuf al-Qaradawi, I don't know whether you know who he is. He is the spiritual father of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's been exiled for 50 years. He came back to Cairo from Qatar and when Hosni Mubarak was overthrown. He says the Sharia cannot be amended, is absolute norm to which all human values and conduct must conform. He is a very prominent one. Sayyid Qutb, I just mentioned, his famous book Milestones, which unfortunately is in many of the mosques here in the United States, said that Sharia is also part of that universal law which governs the entire universe, including the physical and biological aspects of man. Includes political, social, and economic affairs, and their principles and intent, they reflect complete submission to God, that's Allah, since Allah is not God, to God alone. It deals with morals, manners, values, and standards of the society. You can't get much more complete than that.
Definitely all-encompassing. And, Colonel Hobbs, if you just confirm here, and indeed many researchers, there are many people who believe this, that indeed the Muslim goal is the promotion of a global caliphate under Sharia law.
Exactly. That is the object of Islam. And it is their duty. It's their duty, according to all of their training throughout their lives, that they must do this. They're required to take over all places that are not Muslim now, and then to impose Sharia. Let me just give you some idea that Sharia is not something that's just sort of around. The Pew Research, Pew is fairly famous in this country, the Pew, P-E-W. It's a very famous research organization. They did a very extensive study of 39 countries and 3 continents. The only places they couldn't do were China, India, Saudi Arabia, and Syria for some obvious reasons, I imagine. But the percentage that back Sharia as official law in South Asia is 84%, Southeast Asia is 77%, Middle East, North Africa 74%, Sub-Saharan Africa 64%. And parts of these that want them, and then they broke it down by whether or not they support both for Muslims and non-Muslims. And this is the next thing that you're getting. You're getting a whole lot of Muslims saying Sharia should be imposed on non-Muslims. Well, I think it's time to wake up.
Well, I would like to now turn to an article you've written. Excuse me, I need to reference your website again. The website.
Anybody that's interested in any of these books, they should visit the website, coldoc.com, or they can contact me at coldoc@coldoc.com, which is COLDOC, coldoc@coldoc.com.
Thank you, Colonel Hobbs. And I'd like to reference now an excellent article. I've been to Paris about 3 times on business trips. Beautiful city. But they are having problems there, and I think it sounds as though they're worse than in America. I just would like to note some salient points from your article entitled, French Problems, Are They World Problems? You had posted this article January 17th, 2013, so it's fairly recent. First of all, sir, you believe that there is an overwhelming nature of Muslim encroachment into France and French society at this point.
Oh yeah, it's not France. It's all across Europe. It's what I put a chapter in each book called Eurabia.
Yes.
Because Europe is in deep trouble, and France is a good example. It's a leftover from the colonial period when Algeria was a department of France, and there was free movement between Algeria and France. It was part of the whole country. And so now they've got this enormous number, but they're also Moroccans and Tunisians, but it's heavily Algerian. And they don't even know how many there are because they refuse to separate out and check on the numbers. It's probably between 6 and 8 million. If you were in Paris, you probably noticed the suburb on the road to Charles de Gaulle Airport. That area right there on the north side where you turn on the highway to go out to Charles de Gaulle is almost exclusively Muslim. And the firemen and the police are scared to go in there without a lot of compatriots along with them. So it is a very tough thing. And you've seen the mosque. I imagine you've probably seen the video of the people praying in the streets and blocking the streets.
No, I haven't. A major.
Oh, it's discouraging. I mean, they just block a whole street. There's no traffic. They're just out there and that happened in New York now also. So we're learning, but we're learning the wrong things. And they have enormous mosques all over the country. One of the biggest ones is now down in in Marseille, in addition to the very large one in Paris. Hollande, yes, he did get a very large percentage of the Muslim vote, and they're talking about amnesty. Sounds familiar, like we have in this country. There's a real threat of Europe becoming Eurabia. Some people say by 2020, 2025, there'll be a Muslim majority, and it's already showing up in the voting in France, but in other countries. Geert Wilders in the Netherlands is an outspoken member. He was tried for saying some true things about Islam. It took 7 years of court fights before he was finally acquitted. The very interesting thing in Paris and Lyon and Marseille and Toulon and other cities is what they call no-go zones, zone urbaine sensible, which is sensitive urban zones. Right. There are 751 of those zones in France. That's an enormous number. 5 million Muslims. And that's where the French have lost control inside those areas. Well, we have done it too. We have Detroit. In Scandinavia, rape is almost totally Muslim. In Oslo, all the rapes of 2013 were by non-Scandinavian people. Belgium, I just saw again a video which came out I think a year or so ago, confidently saying Europe will be Muslim and they will impose Sharia. So I think it's a pretty sad situation. I think it's time for America to wake up.
Well, what would be your advice? I'd like you to summarize as, so we could either take an 8-minute break or we could continue on for another 10 or 15 minutes, whichever would be your preference. Colonel Hobbs, what would be your recommendations for wise action by Americans? Should we first of all make sure that we read the Quran? I guess the Muslims don't only want people reading it in Arabic, but English versions so that we know just what's going on. Though your research is excellent, just great summaries from Matt and other researchers and authors. What do you think?
Well, everyone should read the Quran. The problem with the Quran, though, it is a very discombobulated book. Part of it is non-understandable. You can't even understand it in Arabic, so therefore you can't even translate it. The reason that it is so screwy is that the Quran, which was done supposedly under the third Caliph Uthman, which was about 20 years after the death of Muhammad, and everything before that basically was oral, with a little bit of writing down. Muhammad was supposed to be illiterate. He's probably the most brilliant illiterate person in history. But anyway, when Uthman finally got through with it and he destroyed all the rest of it that was available, he put it together with the longest surahs. There are 114 surahs in the Quran. 86 of them were written or revealed via Gabriel, the angel Gabriel, supposedly directly from Allah, up in Mount Hira in a cave. But 86 were in Mecca. In the Mecca period, he was busy trying to collect followers. So he was gentle and nice. He was a preacher trying to collect people. In 10 years, he was managed to only get 150 followers. He finally bugged out and went to Medina, which became the known city for him. 28 of the surahs or chapters were revealed in Medina, and these now become totally different. He's now a dictator rather than a guy who's just a preacher, and this is when you get all the harsh things. Now you have Allah saying things that contradict what he said earlier. Well, Allah cannot contradict himself because Allah is perfect and Muhammad is the perfect man. So there has to be an answer. Well, the answer comes out that whatever we said later replaces what we said before. That's called abrogation, and that removes about 225 of the peaceful verses of the Quran. So people like to cherry pick the Quran. but you've got to read it to see some of the meanness in it, the description of hell, the sensuous description of paradise. Actually, to read it, you have to follow the hadith because it's very personal. It gets into marrying his daughter-in-law, all kinds of things that you don't know who it is if you don't know some of the hadith. The hadiths are some of the sayings and ways of the theoretical Muhammad, if he ever existed. And the hadiths were written anywhere from 50 to 200 years after his death. So there were about 700,000 or 800,000 of them, and most of them were called fakes. And there are only a few of them that are even considered real, and that's still up in the air. To get it, what you need to do with the Quran is be sure that you understand the correct order, and you can get that through a website, or even on my website you can get it, which then tells you which ones are in the correct order chronologically to make it sense. So it's a terrible book. One chapter has the same thing repeated 37 times. So people say, oh, it's wonderful, it's great, it's the funniest, oddest book in the world, the most famous book in the world, and probably the least read book in the world.
Well, also, would you advise our schools to have more courses regarding this, regarding the Quran, regarding history, that sort of thing?
Only if they taught the truth. I don't believe they teach the truth. We don't teach history. You ask a kid what D-Day was, he doesn't know what you're talking about. They don't even know when the Civil War was. They don't know who George Washington was. I mean, we're not teaching history, so I'd be scared to death of them trying to teach Islam, because they'd probably bring in an imam. I mean, that's what we've done. We have the imams in the military. Where did we get them? We went to places like CARE and some of these other guys, and they train them for us. So we have these special imams working in the military. I wouldn't. I'd be scared to death, because the school system in this country is another subject.
Well, now, from your service in the military, are you finding now that there's a greater interest in more information? And do you think that America will have more of a pragmatic viewpoint, hopefully?
I'm terribly disappointed in the people all through the government, and that the government has kowtowed to Islam, and they won't use the term Islam. They don't want to say anything. Everything they let CARE dictate to them. CARE writes letters to the Secretary of Defense and tell them we want this and we want that, and Leon Panetta agreed with it and then changed all the wording. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Dooley, who was an instructor at Staff College, he was fired by General Martin Dempsey, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, for teaching a course about Islam, which had been approved up the line, so it was an approved course. Oh, no, we can't have that. So fired him, ruined his career. I'm not sure that most of our people really know what's going on, and it starts with the White House, where you have his advisors. He has Dalia Moged is an Egyptian, and she's a very unusual soul. We had Hume Abedin with Secretary Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State. She's Saudi. Her mother is in Saudi Arabia, and she heads the Muslim Brotherhood's female side, the Sisterhood. Father was a big operator in it. Her brother is at the London School of Economics over there. We have the universities, Saudis, Alawi bin Talal financed them, $10 million to Georgetown, but this goes on in Georgetown, Berkeley, Columbia, Cornell, Harvard, Princeton. They have these Islamic centers, all funded by mostly Saudi money. So guess what you teach in a place like that when somebody else is providing the money? So I'm not optimistic.
Well, now, would you like to mention again your website, Colonel? And thank you again for your military service to the country, also your service with the Department of State. Your achievements are many, and I found your material very, very thought-provoking. I think it's very, very worth careful consideration, careful review. And again, your website can be found at coldoc.com, C-O-M. And I wanted to mention, too, as well, not only being a United States Military Academy graduate at West Point, that's a tremendous achievement, and also, secondarily, receiving that Doctor de l'Université from the University of Lyon. That's a tremendous accomplishment. And so your career accomplishments, you really served our country very, very well.
Well, thank you. That's good. And if anybody has any questions, they can shoot me an email at coldoc@coldoc.com. Coldoc, interestingly, stands for Colonel Doc. When I went to Egypt about every 3 months for 10 years, and some of the people there used to call me Colonel Doctor. And so when I wanted to do a license plate for my car, my wife said, "Well, you should use Coldoc." So that's where Coldoc came from.
Oh, excellent. Mm-hmm. Well, we certainly have appreciated your time with us this evening, and I know the listeners have been very intently hearing your comments, and I thought they considered quite informative as well. I don't know if my co-host wanted to add anything, or anyone from the network. If not, this has been a wonderful, it's been an informative interview, sir, and it was a wonderful opportunity to speak with someone with such a prestigious background and very thoughtful, very inciting research on this very, very important matter. And indeed, we have our friend Cop from the Northeast there. God bless you. He's saying, great guest. He knows his stuff. And then another person, one of our audience members, very nice person, saying for sure.
Well, thank you very much.
Have a wonderful evening, sir. Thank you, and great weekend to everyone. Thank you again, sir.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.